Welcome back, one and all, to another installment of the No Trade Clause podcast. This is your host, Aaron Washington, coming back at you guys live again from the Summer League studio set here in Las Vegas at UNLV 2K25 Summer League. Thanks so much for joining us for another episode. This evening, I have a very special opportunity to have a conversation with one of the greats in the media industry. Guys, this is J.A. Adonde. He is currently the Director of Sports Journalism at Northwestern. J.A., I want to thank you for taking the time. I know I kind of hit you with a short notice this afternoon as things change frequently here on set. But in any case, I'm really glad to have you on the set this afternoon. Really appreciate your time, so thanks again.
No problem. We've been asking people to do interviews with the students here on short notice, so it's only fair that I return the favor, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be a quick discussion, essentially about your experience in the field of journalism and media. So you've been around this game a long time. You know how it goes. And I was just curious to get some of your insights, some things that you picked up during your time working with various outlets and just being a writer, being a columnist, and seeing how your journey has progressed and what you've seen in the industry overall, because it's changed a lot over the past 15 to 20 years, and just in terms of the way we cover sports. So I wanted to get started here, basically how you got started in the industry. SBC is currently going on right now, right under us. They're having a bunch of different midterms, and a big part of SBC, something I'd like to emphasize, is the story of everybody that comes in there, specifically the instructors. We want to get your perspective of your background. So I wanted to first ask you about how you got into this industry, the writing industry, the media industry. Is it something that you wanted to do from a young age? Is it something that you kind of fell into? How did you get started with that? And I know one of your early roles was being a columnist for the Los Angeles Times. How did that come about? How did you get started in all this?
Yeah, I did want to do it. I guess 13 is pretty young, 14 years old,
yeah,
junior high, and I'd go to the Laker games. And, initially I wanted to be on the court with the Lakers. I wanted to be catching passes from Magic Johnson, but I quickly realized that probably wasn't in the cards once everyone else hit their growth spurt, and I was still stuck at 5'1", 5'2", 5'3". Mm-hmm. So I didn't grow until way later. And I decided, okay, I probably need to find another pathway to just be in the forum. And I wound up, I thought maybe I wanted to be Chick Hearn or Jim Murray, the great writer for the LA Times. Chick Hearn being the great legendary play-by-play broadcaster for the Lakers.
Yes.
And I just figured I'll start that path. High school paper, college newspaper, and I had some great internships at the LA Times and the Washington Post along the way. And going to a school like Northwestern really helped set me up, both in terms of the networking and the preparation to enter the field at a young age. It's funny, I saw Juwan Howard here. He was watching his kid play for the Magic, and I thought back to covering him. My senior year was the freshman year of the Fab Five at Michigan.
Oh, wow, nice.
When I was a senior at Northwestern. And then I covered them at Michigan their sophomore year when I was at Chicago Sun-Times. My first job was covering college football and college basketball, Illinois, and the whole Big Ten. Mm-hmm. So I did like 5 or 6 of their games, including the Final Four and the championship game, and the infamous Chris Webber timeout. And then our paths crossed again in Washington when he was on the Bullets, as they were still called, and so was Chris Webber.
Yep. And
then kind of at the end of his career, I just showed him a picture of us that was taken in the locker room when I was interviewing after they won the championship, LeBron's first championship, but it was also kind of the cap. No one thinks of it as the cap of Juwan Howard's career, and the only championship that was won by any of the Fab Five members, by the way. Didn't play a big role on that team, but he was still there, and they valued. He kind of was Udonis Haslem before Udonis Haslem.
Yes.
He was kind of the guy who was around for his experience.
Yep. And
then, so it was just, we just had a great conversation catching up for something that goes back from 1991. I remember the date. It was November 9th, 1991. We were at Michigan. Northwestern playing Michigan in football, and the Fab Five had an open scrimmage afterward. And so I went and checked it out, and that was the first time I was around any of them. And, you still see and feel them impacting basketball world. You still hear Jalen Rose giving his thoughts. He's still really prominent. And so that's coming up on 3.5 decades later. And
Wow.
so we're doing a lot of reminiscing down there courtside.
That's awesome. Yeah, those guys have had a significant impact on the basketball world, the industry as a whole. And now you kind of see the next generation coming up, and you see some of that influence they had. You know, their time in Michigan, and like you said, Juwan Howard being a pros pro, and we've seen other players like Haslam come through and do the same thing for their teams. So, yeah, that's an incredible experience. I'm sure they just spending the time around those guys really kind of taught you a lot. I'm sure it was a special time for all of you getting to form those connections, and it's really cool that Summer League provides the opportunity for guys like you to kind of catch up and reminisce and kind of think about the those old days you've been together. So that's a really cool opportunity.
Yeah, that's been the best part, is seeing people like Alex McKechnie, who's most people don't know his name or his role, but not sure what the specific title is, but when he was with the Lakers, he was I think the athletic performance coordinator was his title. But you know, he does physical therapy and really has some innovative ways to help athletes overcome injuries and prevent injuries and to maintain flexibility and things like that. That's a 20-year relationship from when he joined the Lakers full-time in the 2003-04 season. But prior to that, he kind of first entered the NBA in 96-97 when Shaq was on his first year with the Lakers. That would have been Kobe's rookie year or two.
Yep.
And Shaq had a really bad groin injury, or like a hernia-type injury, and they thought he was going to need surgery that would have kept him out for the rest of the season. And his agent found Alex McKechnie, and they worked with him and rehabilitated him, and he was able to get back in time for the end of the season.
Nice.
So, you know, his kind of connections with the NBA and some of these personalities goes back to then, and our connection goes back 20 years. And
Wow.
and I really value those, and I love walking around, and I just walk around this building to see who I run into, and chances are it's somebody that I've known for a couple decades or more, which means I'm getting old.
No, I would say that maybe you're a little more experienced. Maybe you see some things. Yeah. I like to use that word. I think it's a little more friendly to guys like you just to use something like that, because it's true. I mean, you've seen a lot, you've done a lot, so I think it's pretty accurate. Yeah, I do the same thing myself. I walk around, and I've only been at Summer League for a few years, but the same thing will happen. Like, I'll walk around, and I'm just hanging out by Cox Pavilion, and I'll see 3 people within 10 minutes, and I'm like, hey, I saw you last year, whatever. So love the opportunities here at Summer League. It's a super special place to be. So I next want to get into your time with ESPN. So in 2007, you joined ESPN as an NBA columnist, and you had some experience there just writing about the league, and being with a big outlet like that, I'm sure, was a very unique experience. So I wanted to see if there were any key differences that you experienced between being a columnist for an outlet like the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, compared to being with ESPN, an outlet that's a national outlet, a worldwide leader of sports. That's their whole motto. So transitioning to that position, did you see anything that was a night and day difference, or there were subtle differences between how you covered the game, covered sports? What was that adjustment like for you?
So in some ways it was broader, because now I was dealing with the whole league and not just the Lakers and the Clippers in Los Angeles.
Right.
But it was also narrow, because when I went there, it was just to write about the NBA, whereas at the LA Times, I was covering all sports and doing things like the Olympics, or I found myself at the World Cup one time. So I missed these opportunities to really cover everything. But I did appreciate the ability to focus on basketball, and basketball was really kind of getting bigger and bigger and more important. So being at the epicenter of that was fun. One thing I missed about newspapers I came to miss was, my favorite compliment used to be someone would come up to me and say, I don't really enjoy sports that much. I don't really follow sports, but I like reading your column.
Nice.
And, I could write for the broader audience. And in a newspaper, you might not be a sports fan, but you see the sports section lying around.
Yep.
You're there to read the business section or the arts and entertainment section, and you see the sports section, you see something that catches your eye, a headline, and maybe you pick it up and read it, and you find yourself reading it like, wow, I'm not even a sports fan, but I read that. ESPN, no non-sports fans are going to ESPN. So everything was very sports related, and I didn't go outside of that audience. I liked having that broader reach. You have a huge platform on ESPN.
Yes.
People around the world. So many national people are tuning in, but you don't have people from outside the sports world going to ESPN.
Right. Yeah, that's a very key difference. It's interesting that, like, the way you described it is really cool, because you said that it's both a broader reach and a more narrow. So you got to specialize in the NBA, but the NBA has a broad appeal. It's worldwide. So I'm sure that it was cool to have those different perspectives, going to a place like ESPN. Now, we talked about this before we came on this podcast, but you have experience in this kind of environment, being on camera, being on TV, the lights are on you. So you did the columnist role. That's more of like behind the scenes. They're just words on a page. But you've also been a media personality, and you still are in that role. So I wanted to just get your thoughts on, working with ESPN in a role like Around the Horn, just being in that environment. Would you say that you enjoyed that role any more or less than being a columnist behind the scenes? Because they're very different. Just one is just typing out, and people don't really see your face, and then one is very forward-facing. So do you have like a preference between those two roles, or is it just like a pros and cons thing where you enjoy one part more than the other in a certain position?
So TV is more enjoyable. Writing is more satisfying. The best compliment you get is when people say, I read you, and when they tell you things that really indicate they've read the entirety of the column.
Right.
And it takes more work to read than it does to watch TV. And especially in the era of shortened attention span, it takes a lot, and it's asking a lot for someone to get through a 1,000-word column.
Absolutely.
And so when people come up and say, hey, I read you in the LA Times, or I read you at ESPN, that meant more to me. It was more satisfying to me than when people say, oh, hey, I see you on ESPN. They might not be hearing me. They don't always say, I listen to you. They might be on the TV in the bar or in the place where they work.
Right.
And so they see me, they recognize the face, but that doesn't mean how much they're interacting with the content that I'm producing.
Yep.
I say it's more enjoyable because it's actually fun to do it. Writing has never been fun for me. Like having written, being published is fun, but writing itself isn't that fun for me. When we do Around the Horn, we just have fun in between, and sometimes we put like the outtakes or the stuff, the banter that we have in between when we're actually recording. We'll put that on YouTube or social media somewhere. It's funny, last week I got called in to do an emergency. Somebody couldn't make it, and they needed me to fill in, and I purposely had told them I wasn't available because I was really busy. They said, can you do it? I said, all right, I'll do it. And it was a stressful day because it meant having to go up to work, come back into the city, and afterward go back up to work again and deal with all the things, and phone going off the whole time. And then, but by the end of the show, it's funny, I was so stressed, and it was like the people were hammering in the studio, like right when we're getting ready to tape, trying to breathe deep, concentrate, get through this. But by the end of the show, we just were joking and laughing, and I left in such a good mood because we'd had so much fun and just joking around on the show.
For sure.
And I don't know how many places where you can go to work and leave in a better mood than when you showed up.
Yes.
But that job, and it's a job, but it sure doesn't feel like it when you're sitting down there and you get to talk about sports. Like, I'll never forget one time, it didn't hit me until 24 hours later, but as I thought about it, and I thought about what we talked about on the show the day before, there was, I don't know if you remember, someone on the Pittsburgh Pirates, that the sausage race that they have in Milwaukee at the Brewers games.
Yeah.
Someone on the Pirates hit one of the sausage racers with a bat as they were running by the Pirates dugout.
Oh my goodness!
And it was a big controversy. It turned out it was a woman inside the costume, so it really wasn't a good look.
Yeah.
But she was okay. So
That's
it was kind of humorous that someone would take a bat to a sausage costume.
Yeah. I don't know what would possess them to do that. I don't know what came across their mind.
And so I thought about the next day. I said, wow, I really got paid to go on TV and talk about somebody hitting a sausage costume with a bat. Like, it's a pretty cool job.
Just another day at ESPN. You never know what's going to hit you. I can definitely attest to that. I've never been a part of an outlet as big as ESPN, but doing podcasts for several years now, almost 7 years for me, it's really cool. Like you said, you go into it and you may be stressed out. You're like, oh, man, this is short notice. I don't know if I'm prepared. And it's almost like you just kind of relax as it progresses. So you get more kind of into a rhythm, and you kind of get into the topic you're talking about, and, the jokes start flying and you feel better. So I think that's the joy of TV. Of course, there are times where it can be the opposite, but I've found in many situations where you're podcasting, you're doing a live recording or whatever, you just kind of get into a rhythm. You settle in with your guest, and you form a bond, and it's just such a great opportunity. So I would echo that. I've been in the same situation.
The people that you work with are important. It's funny. It's such a good group at ESPN and Around the Horn in particular. And, Aaron Solomon is the producer of the show overseas. It's funny. I actually worked for his father, George Solomon, when I was at the Washington Post. And George Solomon really believed in having camaraderie in his office and with his staff. And if he was thinking about hiring someone that I knew, he didn't ask if he could write or she could write. He wouldn't be talking to them if they couldn't write. But what he wanted to know from me is, how would they fit in? Would they be a good fit here? So, I think Aaron is taking that into consideration now as he's assembling his staff. And one cool thing about Around the Horn is that it's constantly evolving and changing, and there's fresh blood coming in. It's not the same old faces that it was 20 years ago.
Right.
So it's able to adapt, and, new people can see people that are more like them and that are more relatable to them. Once upon a time, I was one of the youngest people on the show. Now, that's not the case. Yeah, but, so if you're young, there's somebody that you can relate to. And for the people that have watched the show for a long time, maybe they're still riding with me. Can't tell you how often I get people say, oh, man, I used to watch this show all the time when I was a kid. Now they're grown people like 6'5" and, well into their careers in adulthood.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you realize how old that makes me feel. Like, yeah, I used to come home, when I was 12 years old after school and watch the show.
Oh, man.
But it's cool that we're a part of people's lives. They also recognize that, like, certain shows, and this one, like, that's going to be the demographic, right?
For sure.
It's on at, on the West Coast, it's on at, like, 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's who's going to be watching then.
Yep.
And NBA referees, actually. The NBA refs, because, they're in their hotel, they're getting some time in on the treadmill before the game.
True, yep.
So, and they all stay at the same hotels that we did. And so they would always, hey, I was watching today. So, like, I would say, like, 15-year-olds and NBA referees. That was our office.
That's a really weird combination.
That is a weird combination.
Yeah. That's so funny, but that's great. So another role I was curious about, I wanted to get your thoughts on, is being a sideline reporter. So that's a role, it seems to be very challenging. And I'm sure it's something that it takes a very specific type of person to execute properly. So I wanted to see what you thought about that, and in terms of like any specific challenges that you encountered in a role like that. So it's different from being on TV. It's different from writing, a lot different. You're out in the action. You're getting hit by all the different sights and sounds constantly. What would you say are a few key challenges you encountered in a role like that, and how did you work to overcome those and just continue to just progress and grow in that role and be the best that you can be as a reporter?
First, you got to recognize you're probably the least important part of the broadcast that's on the air.
Right.
Because the main thing is the players in the game and the coaches, and then it's the play-by-play and the color commentators, and then it gets down to you.
Yep, finally
so,
at the very end.
Recognizing that you got to be brief, you got to be in and out. The clock's ticking. They got to get back to the show.
Yep.
You're not the show. You're a part of the show. Mm-hmm. Really putting your ego aside and recognizing that you might be the third or the fourth. If you're working with a 3-person booth, if it was like, I had the privilege of working with the A team of Mike Breen and Jeff Van Gundy and Mark Jackson.
Yeah.
So those people are going to eat up all the airtime.
For sure.
I give the producer, Tim Corrigan, a lot of credit. I just bumped into him the other night here. He would find time for me, even with those big names and heavy hitters and those 3 people in the booth. If I had something that, and I think he trusted me, like, hey, Tim, I got something here, he would come to me. But me recognizing that if we get in the fourth quarter and it's a tight game, he's not going to come to me.
Right.
Then it's time for Breen and Jeff and Mark to do their thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So, recognizing that, tuning out everything, I was always amazed at how nothing else seemed to matter. There's thousands of people around. There's people sitting right by you. You're standing like right by the basket maybe when you go on to do your hit.
Yep. And
there's people sitting right there, and it would all kind of
fade
blur
away
to me, and
yeah.
I just cared about looking into the camera and hearing the director count you down to when you were on, or you're listening to when the play-by-play is tossing to you, but you hear go,
Yep.
make sure, because sometimes you can't always hear what the play-by-play is saying. So
right.
They're saying, let's go over to Jay Adonde for more. And they know you might not be able to hear it, so you get a cue and a go, and the red light goes on the camera, and then just being ready to go.
Yeah.
Realizing that you have to match the energy in the arena. I would watch some of mine, and I thought I was being energetic, and I realized I wasn't rising to the level of the energy in the arena. There's 18,000 people in there, and you've got these prime athletes who are the adrenaline is surging through them because they're playing the game. So when you bring the show back from break and you're welcome back to Oracle Arena, which is where they were playing when I was doing it. Welcome back to Oracle Arena. I'm Jay Adonde. You have to match the energy of a building packed with people and fans and, the cheerleaders and music was playing during the timeout. There's a high energy level, and you need to meet that. And I didn't get that at first, and I realized like you really have to bring the energy. It's a different energy. We're not in a studio now. You're in an arena, and there's an energy level that's in there, and you have to match that.
Yeah, got to be ready to, like you said, just match it and just be ready for that environment. Because I'm sure that if you're on the other end and you're watching as a fan and the sideline reporter comes on and they're here and the action is here, there's a disconnect. And
or
they're going to tune you out.
Yeah, it's a come down.
No, for sure. A big question that I've had this for years actually, I wanted to get your perspective on it, is when it comes to the questions themselves that you're asking the coaches, the players on the sidelines, are these questions that, in the flow of the action that you yourself just come up with everything and then you just, when it's time, you just unload everything you have? Or is there a directive from up top, from higher up that like, hey, like we want you to ask something like this, kind of nudge you in a certain direction as far as what to ask, or is it all on you? How much freedom do you have essentially in that?
Yeah, it's up to you. It's not coming out of nowhere because you need to be paying attention, right?
Yeah.
You're listening to what the color commentators are saying. I like to I would think of myself as an extension of the color commentators and the analysts, and they don't have a chance to talk to the coaches during the game.
Right.
So you can tell a lot of times what they would ask the coach if they could. So without directly asking them, hey, what do you want to ask, listening to what they're talking about, listening to the key points that they're making, and so that might inform what I ask. One of my more fun memories was the Clippers were playing the Thunder, and the Clippers were giving Serge Ibaka like the 15-foot jumper, and he kept knocking him down, and they're commenting on the broadcast like the Clippers might have to do something. They're asking him to hit this shot, and he's penalizing them for it. Mm-hmm. And I asked Doc Rivers, can you keep letting Ibaka take that shot? And he said, well, 2 points is still less than 3. Even with my Marquette education, I can make that deduction. So we're going to keep doing it. And so, but you're trying to add to the broadcast through the questions that you can ask. Trying to get something informative or funny, or having some moments. I had some fun moments with Steve Kerr doing that. Rick Adelman once said something really funny, which caught me off guard. I wasn't quite ready for, but it's just like, okay, can I get a little something out of this that can contribute to the broadcast? I don't want to waste time. And you do that by asking good questions. So you do that by paying attention, and you do that by being ready to pivot at a moment's notice. It could be a 4-point game with a minute left when you go over to get ready to do the interview, and then bam, bam, back-to-back three-pointers, and now the coach is losing. Like, I felt like I had, every time I do Warriors and Clippers at Golden State, and Doc Rivers would be the first quarter interview, and it felt like something would happen right at the end that he'd be mad about.
Oh,
and
man.
then I'd catch him in a bad mood.
That's
call
rough.
went against them or something, or they let up and they gave up some points at the end of the quarter. And I'd always have to go interview. And Doc is absolutely one of the best to talk to because he gets it. He was broadcasting, a year ago at the start of this NBA season. So he very much understands what the broadcast is about, and he really wants to help you out.
For sure.
But sometimes you just catch him in a bad mood.
Bad timing. Yeah, would you say that, because I know you mentioned Doc Rivers, and then, of course, Greg Popovich was like a really famous name that a lot of people, I think, would not be the most enthusiastic about asking questions. It seemed like he was always on edge. Was there anybody else that you knew you had to be maybe a little bit more cautious about how you approached them or the questions you asked them because they were notorious for just being tough to interview? Any other names come to mind for you, or were those like the main two guys?
You didn't have to be cautious with Greg Popovich. You just had to be strategic, and you had to be prepared, and you had to understand what he likes and what he doesn't like. And I kind of figured out the secret to it. I told my students here at SBC yesterday, you're going to have to come out here and take the course or take my classes at Northwestern to hear the secret to interviewing Greg Popovich. But, yeah, I unlocked it to the point that I actually looked forward to it. I didn't dread it once you figure out the strategy, but you had to be strategic.
Right. You got to know what you're doing because that's what he wants. That's what he expects out of his players, his staff. He expects that out of media as well.
And the thing with Greg Popovich, especially in print reporter away from the game, like you have to understand, he was never mad at the sideline reporters for doing their job. He was mad at the NBA that he had to do this while he's in the middle of coaching a game, particularly a playoff game.
Yeah, he's in the zone.
So, yeah, I never took it personally.
Sure.
But I did figure out a way, like, okay, if we're here and he got to be here, you might as well, get something out of it, and let's share this time, and let's just try to get him talking. You didn't have to divulge great secrets, but just to get him talking, and
Sure,
I was able to do that. If you watch some of my later interviews with him, I was able to do that.
Nice. Yeah, and it also seems like in recent years he's gotten a little bit more lax in that, a little more laid back, and I think that's just a product of just being around a long time in age and perspective. So it's cool to see that, but yeah, I think it also helped you in that position, just being better in your job. You forced you to operate at a higher level, have a higher standard. So
I tell people, like, during the NBA Finals, Heat Spurs, I'd be walking on the beach in Miami Beach at like 6 in the morning, thinking of questions to ask Greg Popovich at the media availability that day.
Yeah.
Because if you ask a good question, he'll give you great answers.
Oh, yeah.
So I would just think ahead. What do I want to ask him? How am I going to phrase it? And hopefully it's going to pay off later on. But if you just walk in and say, I think I'll ask him.
Yeah, it's not going to fly. Yeah, for sure. For this next segment of the pod, I want to ask you about your current role as the director of journalism over there at Northwestern. So this is a role that you've been in since 2017, moving on, being the director. What kind of inspired you to make that move over to Northwestern and more of a role as a teacher, something that's again, a lot different from your prior roles? What was it that kind of spurred you to transition to that? Because that was your alma mater, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was my alma mater. They asked, first and foremost. But I've been teaching for, at that point, 12 years, actually, as an adjunct professor at USC. And I really enjoyed that. It was my favorite aspect of, my career at that point was teaching. And Northwestern, the dean at the time, Brad Ham, really wanted to emphasize sports. So when I went there, and where generations of journalism students went to Northwestern, there was no sports programming whatsoever. And, he really wanted to ramp that up and take advantage of some of the connections that I had in the industry, the platform that I had at ESPN, which could really help promote the school and the program. So I think those were the appealing things to him, and I had some teaching experience. And one of the best things about it is seeing your students go on and get to live out their dreams. I got everything I wanted out of this, and way more than I ever could have imagined.
That's awesome.
And I have 4 former students here that I've run into, maybe 5. They're within PR with teams, or they're broadcasters with the team, color analysts, or digital reporters, or covering teams for The Athletic. So it just fills me with pride when I see them, and it just makes me so happy just that they get to do it. I got to do it. Not everyone gets a chance to do this at a high level, covering this league, this crazy league.
Yep.
Interacting with the people that they grew up watching, or the people that they've admired. And when I get to see them do it, I wish they could have done it when we did it. I think it was more fun. The access was better. But this is what they know, and this is really fun. They're having a ball. They love doing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it seems like, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about before, the gratification of it. It seems like in your current role, it's very gratifying to see people that you've taught move on to bigger and better roles, see them apply those principles that you taught them in years past. So I really like that aspect of it for you. And it seems like SBC is just another opportunity for you to do what you've already been doing.
Yeah, this is a new element to it. And hearing some of my colleagues talk about their pride that they feel when some SBC alumni are doing things now in the industry, various aspects in there with the team or in media. And I look forward to that one day, saying that hopefully someone can look back to what they learned here in our time together at SBC, and working with Howard and Katie and CP on our media project. A lot of hard work's gone into this. Eric Pincus has been leading Zoom calls for months, and is really giving it his all. This is his first time kind of overseeing and managing it, and you give credit, of course, to Warren and Albert at the top for really having this vision and growing this program. We celebrate the growth of Summer League overall and what it's become.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I certainly have seen it over the last 20 years. But the growth of the SBC program should be really celebrated maybe to a smaller degree, but it's been pretty impressive how big. There's 134 students in it this year, I believe.
Huge number.
And that is a big number.
Yeah.
And they're having these great opportunities. It's funny, they heard from David Falk yesterday and got a chance to ask questions to him, and I thought, man, I was covering the league for 3 years before David Falk talked to me.
They got the
it took
inside
till I
track.
got to the Washington Post. I had to wait 3 years. When I was at the Sun-Times covering the Bulls, he would not return my calls.
Oh, man.
Now, we know each other pretty well.
Nice.
And but it took time. It took time, and these people are getting a jump start to get to talk to people like him and so many of the people that have come through. You really mourn the loss of Jerry West because he was a great friend of the program. And what an awesome experience that the students in the previous years got to talk to him. And it's just sad that that opportunity will never come again. But I'm glad those students got that experience. And in the future, there will be people who will take home their memories of the people that they met here and the famous and important figures in the NBA that took some time to come over and speak to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this landscape is incredible. It's changing every day. But it's great that there are people like you to be able to kind of pave the way and to kind of show them, hey, here's how it's done. Things change, but here are some core principles that should never change. No matter what era we're in or how technology evolves, this is how it should be done. And I want to end off on this for the podcast. I want to get your thoughts on the current landscape of media, how it's changed. You've been in this for quite some time. Like I mentioned before, you're experienced, you're a veteran. So I wanted to get your perspective on, how things are today. A lot different from when you covered the league as a columnist with the Los Angeles Times, back in the day. So what would you say are some of the biggest differences you've seen in this media space, in the way the game is covered, kind of compared to when you were just starting off and you're in your journey kind of getting into this space?
Well, I'll start with the things that stayed the same to the point you were just making. Fairness and accuracy and the needs for both of those things, that still stays the same, and that's fundamental to what I try to teach both at Northwestern and here, being aware of the legalities and what you're protected, what you're allowed to do, what you can't do, what are the ethical boundaries that you should adhere to.
Yes.
So that hasn't changed. What's changed is that there are more people involved who are kind of in this space who don't necessarily follow all those guidelines, right? And don't feel the need and can get reckless and maybe don't have an institution like the New York Times whose standards they're trying to adhere to, and they can just do and say whatever they feel. They feel entitled to do that. So the fact that you have to compete with that, the fact that the speed is so much faster, you might not have the chance to get the 3 or 4 sources that your boss at the newspaper would have required of you. And now, if you want to be the first to have it on Twitter, you might just have to go with one source.
Yeah, it's got to get it out there.
And that's not healthy, but that's the state of the industry these days. And so
that's how it is.
The other thing I say, it might be harder to get paid to do this initially, but the barriers to entry are lower.
Yeah,
Anyone
absolutely.
with a phone,
pick it up and record.
This is a publisher. Used to take a printing press and a broadcasting studio and satellite dishes and an FCC license.
Yeah.
Those were the ways to get the word out to mass amounts of people. And now, a cell phone or a good Wi-Fi.
Yep.
That's all it takes.
That's all you need.
You can broadcast, you can publish, but it can be a little bit dangerous, but it should be encouraging too that you don't necessarily, there aren't the gates that you have to go through. If you really would love to do this, there's nothing at all stopping you from doing it.
There's no excuses. You just have to be willing to put in the work and invest in yourself. I think believe in yourself is another key component of that. Be confident. Like you said before, I mean, you have to have a certain presence, a certain energy about it when you're covering it, at least if you're on camera. And a lot of people like to do that. If you're on YouTube, that's a huge space now, and I've gotten into that recently with the No Trade Clause podcast being on YouTube and try to make a presence there. So the same thing applies. But yeah, I really kind of keyed in on your comment about Twitter and how you need to get things out quickly, and the accuracy sometimes falters in that. And it plays into almost every part of media now. It's like if you're not first, you're last. It's kind of like that's how it almost feels now, and it's unfortunate. But it's just the reality we're in today, where it's like news travels so fast, you have to be on top of it, or else they're going to get it from somebody else, and you become irrelevant. So it's just kind of, it can be stressful at times.
The other thing that's better, though, is I tell women who are interested in getting into business all the time, there's never been a better time to be a woman in this business.
That's true,
You see them everywhere. We saw a historic NBA Finals with Doris Burke doing the commentary for ABC.
Yep.
So, everywhere you look, there are women with great opportunities and who are just killing it on the airwaves or at the microphone or at the keyboard. And so, that's exciting because the industry just looked the same and denied opportunities for so long. And now those opportunities are there, and these women are coming in and just killing it.
They are killing it. Like you said, barriers to entry are a lot lower today. So it's not just about skill level, but the type of, what kind of person you are. It's really cool to see that. So it's like almost everyone has an opportunity now to make their mark. You just have to be willing to work at it. So, J.A., one last thing before I let you go. I'm sure there are a lot of people that might be watching, listening to this podcast that are interested in becoming a part of this industry, in the media, and the journalism. They want to write about it. They want to talk about it. What would you say are some of the biggest factors towards success? So if you had to kind of give some words of advice, words of wisdom to people watching this, and they're like, I want to be in Jay's shoes one day. I want to be on ESPN. I want to be a columnist. I want to be with the Los Angeles Times. What do you think are some of the biggest key factors they need to keep in mind if they want to pursue a career like this?
There's no shortcuts, and your word is all you've got. Your integrity is all you have. I go back to the words, my first year teaching at USC, Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon, was the graduation speaker. And he said, you can lose your health through no fault of your own, stricken with cancer or something like that. You can lose all your money, bad investments or something like that can happen, wipe out all your wealth. And the one thing that can't be taken from you without your consent are your values. And that really stuck with me. And I tried to adhere to that. Even before I heard those words, though, I tried to maintain and live up to a code and the integrity and the ethics that were taught to us when I was at Northwestern, and just the standards that my mom set for me. And so it was kind of good on the back end as I was, kind of exiting the industry and transitioning this new phase and some of the accolades that might come our way. But the people, I've told you about some of the people I've known for decades in this business, and to hear those people come up and just tell me that they respected the way that I did it and they wish more people did it that way. But, I was someone whose word that they could trust and who they could feel confident in when they spoke to, that I wasn't going to misconstrue their words or violate any type of agreements that we had. Something off the record would stay off the record, et cetera. Hearing that really meant a lot to me, and you can only get those through decades of doing it the right way. So that payoff, that satisfaction, maybe there would have been greater rewards financially or something like that if I'd done it different ways. But to be able to stay true to myself, to be able to stay true to the values that were instilled in me from family and from the professors that I had at Medill, and you do this for the audience and you do this for your bosses. Those are the people you're there to serve. You're not there to please the people that you're covering.
Right.
But if you can get their respect, if they can respect, they might not always like what you have to say.
Sure.
They recognize that sometimes, you're going to write something that they would rather you not.
Sure.
But if they understand I'm just doing my job and it's not a personal attack on them, and to hear them come back at the end and say, I respected the way that you did it. So if you think about, would you like those accolades, then there are some things that you have to do, some sacrifices that you have to make along the way, but the payoff is tremendous.
Yeah, it's worth it. 100% worth it. I think that's the biggest takeaway. You have to have values and stick by those. And I think that's not really common anymore. I think it's kind of like a dying breed, just people that adhere to their values and stick to that. So that's huge, and I think everybody out there needs to hear that. It's very important. So, J.A., I'm going to let you go. That brings us to the end of our podcast. But, hey, thanks again for joining us. I really love what you do. Love the work that you've done over the years. It's been great to just kind of link up with you and kind of get some insights about this. I think it's going to be a huge value to everybody listening, watching this podcast. So thanks again for joining us. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, guys, this is another one of our great podcasts here at Summer League. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back with another couple of podcasts here over the next day or so. So we're not quite done at Summer League. We have more action coming your way. So we hope that you will stick with us and give us your time as we continue to cover the NBA and interview great people like J.A. as we continue our coverage of NBA Summer League. So thanks so much, guys. We hope to see you on the next installment of NTC. Take care and have a good one.